Hello, loves. Today I have compiled quite a few good stories. Let's get started. Story 1: The First Boy I Loved. The stupor of the summer heat brought me a sense of comfort as I stared off into the sunset, sitting on top of my friend's roof. The distant sounds of cars rolling by softly drummed in my ears. I could hear my other friends laughing. The joy in their voices was almost palpable to the touch. As a smile crept on my face, in that moment, I yearned for nothing than for that moment to never end. A cool breeze swept over my face as if it were a signal from the sun itself that it was now receding over the horizon, an au revoir to a beautiful day. Oranges and purples turned into cool blues and deep violets as the silver-tinged moon rose over the now dark skyline. I had seen him earlier that day. His handsome face, tall frame, and messy brown hair bounced as he ran past the house I was staying at. "I'll see you later," he said as he ran by. I wish I could relive the almost celestial feeling that those words gave me. Drops of dopamine. Surges of serotonin. Those words were electrifying. As I reminisced over those emotions on the roof, we began filing one by one out of the window and towards the local pizza restaurant. We walked through the humid summer night air, laughing and joking with each other. During that whole time, I could only think of him. Was it the aura of his confidence that seemed to bring me under his enchanting gaze? Or was it his gleaming white smile that could pierce even those darkest of cloudy days? Whatever the reason, my heart raced with excitement at the thought of seeing him later that night. We grabbed the largest pizza the place had to offer. The pizza was almost too big and burdensome to carry back to the house, but we took turns, shoving the piping hot box into each other's arms like it was a game of hot potato. Once we got back, we immediately went over to the back porch where the soft yellow glow of the lights illuminated the cozy backdrop of our new hangout spot. Time blurred away as we got lost in conversation. The sounds of crickets. The soulful sounds of a genuine deep laugh. I could see the memories in front of me already being burned into my mind. The joy I felt being among them was inexplicable. But as I checked the time on my phone, I realized it was finally time for the meeting I had been longing for since I had arrived in town. It was time for him. I took one final sip from my can, gave my friends the most exuberant hug I could give, and stepped down from the balcony. The moon cast its ghostly pale blue rays down on the sidewalk as I turned the corner to his place. It almost felt like it was trying to reassure me as my heart drummed in my chest. Before I could have time to consider the doubt that was slowly creeping into my mind, he opened the door. There he was, just as stunning as before. His blue eyes were still luminescent and bright in the darkness of the night. He offered me his hand, and like instinct, I reached out to grab it. As we sat there in his bed, we talked on and on for hours about whatever nonsense we had decided to land on. I tried my best to do anything to make him laugh. That beaming smile that could melt even the iciest of hearts. This boy had enchanted me, a feeling that I had never felt in my life before. The scariest thing was that I was completely fine with him conquering my every desire and fear. Never had someone so easily comforted me and brought me into a place of absolute trust. As the night rushed by, we lay down side by side. His face nuzzled my neck as he threw his arms over my chest. I knew he could feel the rapid thumps coming from my chest. The heat radiated from my face as he kissed me gently on my neck and ears. I turned over to him, looking into his eyes. It was like an ocean, one where you could look out from the shoreline and get lost in the waves that twinkled in the hot summer sun. I was completely engulfed with desire, a longing for someone so strong that for a moment, I knew nothing more than what it was like to be with him. He brought me in closer, sliding me so that my chest met his, our legs wrapped together. I knew he could see the burning flames of passion in his eyes when he kissed me. The sounds of 1,000 fireworks burst in my heart as he held me close and kissed every part of my body. A euphoria that no drug could ever even dream of buying. He grabbed the towel and laughed as he gently wiped away at my face. There it was again, that ever-brilliant smile. He jumped back into bed and lay directly beside me. The conversation continued just as quickly as it had before. Hours turned into seconds when I was with him. In the one moment when the room fell silent, I laid my head back against his chest and stared at the window as the moon's comforting light fell directly to our feet. "I never want this night to end," I blurted. "Me either, this is everything I could have ever wished for," he replied. I embraced him, millions of neurons firing in my brain telling me to never let him go. As we fell asleep together, the moon outside the window bid me one last good night as its brilliant platinum beams began to fade to the dawn of a new day. Golden filtered rays splashed through the windows when I woke up that morning. The air conditioner hummed silently in the background as I peeled freshly washed covers off the air mattress I had slept on the night before. I stood up, smirking as I looked back at the air mattress. At least it was only temporary, I thought as I stretched and glanced around the newly minted room that I would call home for the next year. Flurries of little butterflies danced in my stomach and chest when I thought about his arrival that day. I stepped out into the living room, the cool touch of the hardwood embracing my feet as I stepped to the balcony windows. The view was breathtaking, almost as beautiful as his soft blue eyes. The mountains shimmered in the morning sun, fog draping the distant skyline. I walked back over to the kitchen and opened the almost empty fridge. I smiled. I just couldn't help but think of him as I prepared for the busy day ahead of me. My parents met me at my door no more than an hour after I had opened my eyes. I embraced them, excited to unfold another chapter in my life. We toured the town. The sights and sounds which were familiar to me, but foreign in their eyes. I stepped out of the car in the blazing summer sun, its unrelenting heat bearing down on my white t-shirt. Just this one last task before I can see him, I thought. It was hours before me, and my father finally brought the bed back to my apartment. I gave my father a hearty high five. It was finally complete. Everything was in place, from my desk to my newly placed bed in the corner where the air mattress was this morning. I hugged my parents one last time as they walked through the door to bid their goodbyes. Phew. I swiped the beads of sweat on my forehead as I walked back to my room. I stood in front of my fan, soaking in its icy cold breeze. My phone rang in the corner. It was him. My heart skipped a beat as I stared down at the luminescent screen. He was close, only 30 minutes away. Excitement filled every vein of my body at the thought of seeing him, but in that state. I stripped away my sweat-stained clothes and jumped in the shower. The knock on the door rang throughout the empty apartment as I dried my hair in the bathroom. Shit. Fuck. I dropped the towel, pulled on my clothes, and walked over to the door. I could hear my heart thumping in my ears as I reached out to the door handle. I looked through the peephole. It was him. I pulled the door open. He was just as beautiful as from the last time I had seen him. His tousled soft brown hair blew gently in the summer breeze. An oversized t-shirt draped his lean frame. The veins in his arms softly pushing from under his skin would make even the fittest bodybuilders jealous. He only caught a second glimpse of my still wet complexion before I ran into his arms for a hug. His smell was intoxicating when I kissed his neck. A sense of total euphoria flooded over me when I finally looked into his sky-blue eyes. He gazed happily at me when I finally let him go and pulled him into my apartment. I ran around the still empty living room, showing him my new home. He set his things down on the ground and walked over to the window with the views that I had just taken in this morning. The sun's rays bounced off his eyes as he stared off into the distance. I came behind him and gave him a full-bodied hug. I nuzzled my head against his neck, my face fitting perfectly into the groove of his shoulder where his collarbone jutted out. "I missed you so much," I said. "I missed you even more." He turned around from his gaze and looked into my eyes before landing a perfectly placed kiss on my lips. My heart almost exploded with joy. I closed my eyes, brilliant flashes of color erupting in my mind as he pulled me closer to him. His chest, his stomach, his legs brushed up against my own body as I felt myself being drawn into him. At that moment, all I wanted was him. There was nothing more I could want as he pulled back from the kiss and brushed a stray hair out of my face. I led him over to my room, pride beaming from my smile as I showed him around. He pointed at the bed. I laughed, explaining my and my father's struggle to haul its bulky frame up the slender staircase outside. He jumped on it and lay down. He opened his arms, signaling for me to come to him. I flew into his arms and he instinctively closed them around me as we embraced. He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, and then my lips. "At least it's not the air mattress," he mused before pulling his shirt off and throwing it aside. I laughed. "It still would have been comfy," I quipped. "With you in it, I know it would have been," he said. "Now, kiss me. Come on. Get up, the sun has been out for hours now." I jabbed at him as he was lying down beside me on my bed. I watched as little dust particles danced in the afternoon sun coming in from my window. The light bounced off his messy brown bed hair, his face flush with blissful peace as he snored gently into my pillow. I couldn't stay mad at him. Instead of giving him another playful push, I laid back down and draped his arms over me. He instantly pulled me in closer, flutters of butterflies swirling around my chest and stomach as he did so. I heard the soft rustle of the branches outside, and the sweet sounds of the birds chirping away as I drifted back to sleep in his arms. I woke up to him now awake playing with my hair. "Finally," he joked. "Finally? I was the one trying to get you up, you sleepyhead," I remarked back to him. He gave a light push, and I shoved playfully back at him. He laughed, the sound seemingly bending my cheeks upwards into a smile as I looked back up into his eyes. "Come on. We got to get some food, I'm starving," I pleaded. "Okay, fine, let's get going then, princess." I punched him in the shoulder, and he wrestled me back onto the bed. I tried to maneuver him off of me, but when he wrapped his hands around mine and pushed them back behind my head, my arms and legs went silent. He looked down at me, and at that moment, it felt as if I had melded into the bedsheets. We stayed there for a second, the world revolving around us as we stared into each other's eyes. I felt a strong primal urge claw its way to my consciousness. I lunged up from under his grip and landed a kiss on his lips. He let my hands go and cupped my face. We embraced each other, our bodies intertwined in the afternoon light. I kissed his neck with the fires of what felt like a million burning suns. I had never loved someone in this way before. "I love you," I said. The words slipped out my lips as I looked down at him. "I love you, too." This was the first time we had heard those three little words muttered. The current of emotions that ripped through my body was almost unbearable. I loved this brown-haired boy more than anything in the world. Everything in my life almost faded away in significance when I compared it to him. The sun had finally set by the time we stepped out of the apartment. He placed his arm over my shoulder as we walked down the stairs to his car. We were meeting up with his friend later to hang out. I was very much looking forward to meeting her. I could almost see the enthusiasm in his voice as he was describing her to me. He was excited for me to meet one of his friends, another look into the beautiful life of the boy I loved. As we got into the car, he slipped his hands into mine from the driver's seat and looked into my eyes. The beating, unrelenting heat of the summer sun. The blissful symphony of crickets in the evening air. Everything in my life faded away into irrelevance as I sat there in the front seat, whipped up by the swirling whirlpools of love. She was going to meet us at the library that was under construction just a little ways away from my apartment. We stopped by the volleyball court. The sun had set by then, but the air still carried with it the heat of the day. As we played around in the sand, I wanted nothing but to capture this moment on film. It was so simple, just me and this boy. I stood there, staring up at the night sky. The twinkling stars and glittering silver moon gestured their approval as I ran in to give him a bear hug. I nuzzled my head into his chest, his hands wrapping around mine and fingers running through my hair. He laughed gleefully, pushing me back and knocking me down into the sand. As he lay on top of me and covered my back and his arms, time slowed. His piercing blue eyes looked into mine. He lowered his head to kiss me, and I swear, it felt as though the sand would swallow me. I could not imagine anything else in the world that could make me happier. Simply being in his presence made me whole. Before we got too carried away, we remembered the reason why we were here in the first place. His friend walked over to us, enthusiastically calling out his name and waving over to me. "Hi," she exclaimed. "It's so nice finally getting to meet you. He's been raving about you." "Has he now?" I replied. I smirked and looked over to him. I could see even in the darkness of the night how his cheeks were starting to flush cherry. "Hey, stop it," he yelled back. "Let's get going, shall we?" We traveled up to the library, bright yellow fencing blocking off the entrances. "Maybe we should try the ladder down over there," he suggested. Before we could even get a word of protest in, he started climbing down. He's a brave one, I thought. Without a second thought, I started down after him, and not too long after me, his friend did as well. Once we were inside, We shone our flashlights on the crumpled wallpaper and torn up floors. How this place was once so beautiful, not just a shell of its former self. Memories of my time in this building flashed before my eyes as we passed once familiar but now empty halls. After a while, we finally found ourselves on the roof. A nice chilly wind blew tufts of his brown hair as we stared over our college campus. I couldn't do anything but admire his tall and lean frame. I felt an invisible string tug me towards him. "Hey! Look over here, you guys," his friend yelled from a distance. Before we could walk over, he grabbed me by the waist and kissed me under the midnight moon. "I love you," he said as he let go of his kiss from my lips. We spent the rest of the night stuck in deep conversation on the top of that roof. When it was time to go home, we bid his friend goodbye. "It was so nice meeting you," I exclaimed. "Hope to see you soon." When we got back, we both splayed on my bed. We were exhausted, but at the very least, we had each other. We embraced, legs intertwined while we faced each other. "Love you," I whispered in his ear. "Love you more," he whispered back, a smirk creeping up on his face. I smiled. I couldn't help it. As we fell asleep in each other's arms, his three little words bounced around in my head as I slowly slipped away into the night's warm embrace. A couple of weeks after our library adventure, he was once again in my apartment. His presence had become a comforting and familiar force in my life. Every time he stood waiting at my front door, I could feel the warmth of his hug, the smell of cologne, and the scruffiness of the stubble on his face. I loved this boy, but happily ever after was never guaranteed. Small disagreements began to grow into full-blown arguments. Simple conversational discourse turned into yelling. But at the end of each one of our fits, we would work out our differences for the sake of once again being in each other's arms. But as time marched forward, the arguments intensified. Emotional turmoil and manipulation was rampant, but my naivety would always triumph at the end of the day. I had never been so in love, nonetheless, with the most handsome boy that I had met thus far. So each time his words tore into my heart, his honeyed apologies would suture the tears back together. Just like a cool wind before a summer thunderstorm, I could once again sense another brewing yelling fit between the two of us as accusations were brought up before us again. What happened? I thought. It was only a few weeks ago that this boy was lying on top of me on the sands of a volleyball court, now ripping into the heart he had once claimed to love. I stormed out of the room, tired of the same remarks. As I walked out to the front steps of my apartment, I could feel the tears rushing into my eyes. I sobbed into my arms. I couldn't take it anymore. I called my friend, the tears flowing down both sides of my face. She tried to comfort me, but the shuddering tears and uncontrollable torrent of emotions made everything she said sound like a muffle. "What do I do?" I weakly asked her. "Don't give up just yet, this always happens in love. You have to work through it, and the two of you will be stronger on the other side," she coaxed. I walked back into my room. He was still sitting on my bed. I climbed into his arms and cried more into his chest. He ran his fingers through my hair, willing me to stop my tears, but I could not find the switch in mind to make them stop. "It's okay," he said. "It's not going to be the end of the world, we just have to figure out what we both want, and that might take some time. But I still love you." Silence crept from the darkness into my soul. Had I lost him? Was this the last time I would ever see him? A couple more weeks passed before I would see him again, and this time there was this feeling of dread I could feel deep within my bones. A heavy, ironclad sense of regret and wondering of what was going to happen next. We reminisced on the past for a moment, lying in bed enjoying each other's company. But the old proverb of time heals all wounds was not complicit in our case as another bout of yelling began. Each searing remark scorched a mark so significant in my heart that I could feel its strings ripping as I began to cry. "Just leave then," I screamed. "I can't stand it anymore." He began angrily packing his bags, throwing in the clothes that were scattered all across the floor. Regret immediately clawed its way back up my throat, but it was too late. I hugged him from the back, begging him to stay, apologizing for my outburst. But like that, it was done. Not a kiss. Not a hug. Not even a goodbye. As I watched him walk out the front door wearing the gray shorts that I had given him a few nights before, it felt as though the heavens themselves had crashed down from the skies above and put their full weight on my shoulders. I fell to my knees. I guess that was it. As fast as it had started, it had ended so bitterly. Anger. Frustration. Longing. Regret. Guilt. What had gone so wrong? What could I have done better? Was it all my fault? I was so angry, but the sadness that washed over my heart was unbearable. A visceral pain so deep, it felt as though nothing could bring me up from the pit of Tartarus that I had been cast asunder. Goodbye, my brown-haired boy. My first real love, like that, slipped through my fingers. Days blurred together as I lay in bed. The sun's once warming rays burned bright into my tear-ridden eyes as I turned to pull the covers over my head. Every so often, I would grab my phone, hoping to see a new message from him, but there was nothing but radio silence. Eventually, I stopped looking altogether and began to get lost in my thoughts. Flashes of our time together would replay on my eyelids when I closed my eyes. His ruffled brown hair. His piercing blue eyes. The first night we met, the beautiful sound of his gleeful laugh. I had lost it all, and it felt like my world as I had known it had disappeared alongside. There was not enough room for my happiness if it meant that I could not be with him. My phone would fall off the shelf, and my friends would call me, worried that I had not left or gone anywhere in so long. What's the point of it all, I thought. How can some people wander throughout their long lives and experience such pain and move on to the next person without a care in the world? Maybe it just wasn't for me. Maybe I wasn't meant to be happy with someone, rather, I would have to march through the monotonous drums of life alone before the comforting embrace of darkness would take me back into its arms. Whatever the case, days turned into weeks before I found the strength within me to return to the world outside of my cocoon. Even then, it felt like I was still a shell of the former self that I was so happy to be when I was around him. Why did my face beam with such happiness then, but now grimaced at the thought of his eyes? I had never really truly known what nothingness felt like until the kiss of summer did nothing to comfort me, and the warm breeze seemingly blew through my hollow soul. "Am I okay?" I would ask my friends. "Of course you are," they would respond. That empty and meaningless response. "I'll be okay, I guess." But does the pain ever recede from someone when they have in their possession so many of your firsts? He was my first boy. The first boy I had given everything to. The first person I truly fell in love with, a deep burning passion and desire for another twin soul that for so long I did not believe was possible for me to experience. My first boyfriend. Tears and regret could not buy him back, and no matter how much I tried to reconcile myself over what seemed like such a tremendous loss, the empty void would return and hopelessness would find its place back in my consciousness. I longed for his embrace. I could hear his laugh and see his smile. I imagined the summer night on the volleyball court with him. How nothing in the world mattered when his gleeful laughs rang throughout the sandy courts. How I hugged him tightly, kissing his neck and cheeks as he stared longingly into my eyes. All in an instant, those little moments had vanished from my grasp. And to put it simply, it hurt more than anything. One likes to imagine that heartbreak does not physically hurt, that the descriptions from previous lovers are just over-exaggerated personal manuscripts to describe a more profound primal pain. But when days turned into weeks of treading through the deep abyss of nothingness, the pain of not having him there was all too real. There was this tightness in my chest. It was as if God Himself placed His overbearing hands on my rib cage and was crushing unrelentingly to force me to gasp for air. As soon as a memory of him would flash in front of me, a cold and sharp stabbing pain would run down my face and end at my heart. Nothing could have prepared me for that pain. No drug nor anesthetic could possibly remove the deep-rooted emotional turmoil that clawed its way through my body. But just like any other injury, time does heal all wounds. The void would begin to fill with muted colors once again, although now with darker shades of jade replacing the rose-colored tints from before. His face became less and less clear to me as more lovers cycled in and out of my life. He was now just a part of a mosaic of men that I had created as an escape from the pitiful reality that was my romantic affairs. Was I just that emotionally incompetent, or was I simply too naive? Whatever the case, the tears in my heart were clumsily sutured through one-night stands, although some deep residual pains never really subsided. The pain of wanting to be held and loved, but never finding the right person that could hold me in such the same way as he did that night on the volleyball court. The pain of looking over in bed the next morning to be excited to see the face of my lover, but not compared to those ocean blue eyes that once sent an electrifying thrill down my spine every time. You were a lesson, brown-haired boy. And although you left me broken and a ghost of who I was when I was with you, I'm thankful for you and your impact on my life. This final part is an appreciation of you, as the pain you inflicted upon my naive and fragile soul only strengthened my resolve and solidified my identity. And for that, I thank you. I'll always love you for being the keeper of my firsts, but for what it's worth, my love for you has become stale. I have to move on to new ventures, and your chilling eyes can no longer hold me from finding someone who can make me feel loved and accepted for who I am. Goodbye, my first love. Thank you for everything, and I hope for nothing but the best for you. Story 2: The Love Story of a Friend. I couldn't sleep, so I thought it'd be a good idea to walk to the park and stare at the sky. So there I was, in my yellow t-shirt and blue shorts, reaching my destination. There I saw her, looking at the sky with ginger-red hair coming down her shoulders and blue eyes glittering in the moonlight. It was Laura from my class. Her gaze shifted from the sky to me. What are you doing here, this late at night, Aiden? She asked. I never talked to her at school. She's one of the quiet kids in class. This is the first time I'm hearing her voice. And she usually wears glasses at school, but she wasn't wearing them right now. I took a seat beside her. What are you doing here? I looked her in the eyes. She shifted her gaze back up to the sky. The moon's pretty. I always come here at around this time, every single night for stargazing. I looked up at the sky. I couldn't sleep, so I came here, she giggled. You couldn't sleep, so you came here to stargaze? Will that help you fall asleep? Well, what about you? Why are you always coming here? I asked. Like I said, I always come here, because I get bored and sometimes, because I can't sleep, it's dangerous here, you know? You could get kidnapped or something. We chatted a bit and had fun. Why do you not talk like this at school? I asked. She shrugged. I guess I don't like socializing. I'm shy and don't have friends to talk to. Then how come you're able to talk to me? Well, something tells me that I can trust you. She smiled. Well, see you at school tomorrow. Good night. We both went home next day. I was walking to my class when I saw Laura and a bunch of other girls surrounding her. I saw one of them slap her and throw her glasses onto the floor. They walked away. I was running toward her. Are you okay? Why did they do that? I asked as I picked up her glasses and put them on her. I'm fine. I'm used to it. Thanks. She quickly rushed away. It was lunchtime and I saw Laura by herself. I walked to her and sat at her table. Why are you joining up with me? She asked with concern. Is it against the law to sit with you? You seem lonely. I asked with a smile. People call me a witch because of my red hair. I hate this red hair. I think your hair is pretty. She looked at me and smiled. Thank you. I knew I could trust you. I suddenly had an idea. Hey, wanna go out on a date tomorrow? Are you confessing? No, it's just for fun. I guess I can go the following day. I met up with her at a cafe. We were sipping coffee. We talked a lot and had loads of fun. Shopping, restaurants, and then we decided to go to a movie. After we finished the movie, it was already night time. Gosh, it's already 10. I've got to go home soon, I said, looking at my phone. Can we sit at the park and look at the stars for a few minutes? Laura asked. Yeah, sure. You sure do love stargazing. We sat next to each other on a bench in the park. We both looked up at the bright crescent moon. I looked at Laura from the corner of my eye. She was completely fascinated. She caught me looking at her and smiled. She leaned against my shoulder and put her hand on mine. I like you, Aiden. She gave me a peck on the lips. Sorry, I didn't mean to dash. I leaned over, took her glasses off and locked my lips onto hers. She was surprised, but she put her arms around my neck. I put my hands on her cheeks and we kissed. That was my first kiss, Laura said, blushing. I've really fallen for you. I hugged her. I've fallen for you too. Here's your second kiss. We kissed again. Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.